Before we dive in, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends and family. Also, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you. Thanks. So back when I was 24, I had this habit of doing short solo road trips on weekends. I didn't have a ton of money, but it was my version of clearing my head. Get out of town, throw on a podcast, and drive. I'd just find a cheap motel, crash for a night, and head back the next day. No frills, just gas, coffee, and silence. One Saturday in late October, I was driving back from a fishing town called Dry Creek, about 4 hours from where I lived. I'd stayed there the night before at a half-decent lodge, but something told me to take the long way back, through the lesser-traveled county roads. I wanted to see more trees, less traffic. I ended up driving longer than I expected. The sun started to dip behind the hills around 6 p.m., and a thick layer of fog was rolling in through the trees. I hadn't seen a gas station or town for about an hour. I wasn't exactly panicking, but I didn't want to drive into the night in a place I didn't know. That's when I saw the old neon sign through the fog. It buzzed faintly. Vacancy. Red and flickering like it hadn't been serviced in years. The motel sat off the road, just a single-story L-shaped building, maybe 10 rooms at most. I slowed down and pulled into the gravel lot. My tires crackled against the stones. I remember looking at the building and thinking, this place is probably barely functional. But the thought of driving another hour into God knows what part of nowhere wasn't appealing either. The main office was a small glass-fronted room with faded blinds and a yellow bulb dangling above the counter. I walked in and rang the bell. The smell hit me first. Stale air, dust, something faintly chemical. A man appeared from the back room after about 30 seconds. Mid-60s maybe, white beard, wiry frame, eyes just a little too wide for comfort. He didn't smile. "You want a room?" he asked. "Yeah, just one night," I said, pulling out my wallet. "You guys take card?" He nodded slowly and pushed the register closer to me. I paid, and he handed me a dull brass key attached to a thick wooden block with the number 7 burned into it. "Far end," he said. "Last one. You're the only guest tonight." I gave him a tight smile and thanked him, then walked back out into the fog. The air was cold, colder than I remembered it being when I stepped out of my car. I got to room 7, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. It was, well, exactly what you'd expect. Thin brown carpet, a double bed with a dated floral comforter, a nightstand with a chipped lamp, and a small TV that looked like it hadn't been touched in a decade. The bathroom was tiled with pale blue squares and smelled faintly of mildew, but the water worked and the toilet flushed, so I didn't complain. I dropped my backpack on the floor and sat on the edge of the bed. That's when I noticed the strange thing. There were no mirrors in the room. Not in the bathroom, not above the desk, not on the closet door. Nothing. It's something you don't really think about until it's absent. The only reflective surface was the small dark TV screen, which stayed off. I brushed it off, chalking it up to the place being outdated. I ate a sandwich I'd packed earlier, then laid down on the bed, scrolling through my phone. No signal, not even one bar. I got up, held it near the window, still nothing. I figured it was a dead zone and tossed my phone onto the pillow. That's when I heard the voice. It wasn't loud, more like a mumble, just outside my window. The curtains were drawn, but I could make out the silhouette of someone standing there. I sat upright. "Hello?" I called out, inching toward the window. The voice stopped. I hesitated, then pulled the curtain back. Nothing. Just the thick fog pressing against the glass. No footsteps, no movement. I looked around outside. The main office was dark now. The light in the lot had flickered off. Every other room was unlit. I turned around to head back to bed, and that's when I noticed something else. There was an old Polaroid photograph on the nightstand. I hadn't seen it earlier. It showed a man, maybe in his 40s, standing at the very same window in the same room, looking terrified. It was grainy, like a surveillance shot taken from the outside. On the back, scribbled in faint pen, "You'll see it too." I felt a chill rise in my spine. I dropped the photo and immediately checked the door. Locked. I checked the bathroom. Empty. I opened the closet. Nothing. I sat on the bed again, heart thudding. The silence was heavy now, thicker than before. I stared at the TV screen across from me. It was off, but the black screen showed a faint reflection of the bed, except there was someone sitting beside me. I spun around instantly, but no one was there. I stared at the empty space, then looked back at the TV. Now the screen just showed me, and the empty room. I didn't sleep that night. I sat upright, eyes on the window back against the wall. Around 3:30 a.m., I heard footsteps outside again. Slower this time. Deliberate. Then, a knock on the window. Just one. A soft tap that seemed to echo through the room. I didn't move. I didn't respond. When the sun rose, I got up, shoved my stuff in my bag, and left. I returned the key to the front office. No one was there. Just the bell on the counter and that stale chemical smell. I left the key, walked to my car, and drove off. Here's the weirdest part, though. Later that night, after I got home, I was unpacking and I noticed something in my bag. That Polaroid. I never put it in there. I flipped it over. The handwriting had changed. Now it read, "Room 7 is never empty." I reported the motel to the sheriff's department in that county a week later. They told me the place had been closed for almost a year. Health code violations, unpaid taxes, even a missing persons case tied to the address. Apparently, the man in the Polaroid had checked in and never left. I haven't done a solo road trip since. Sometimes when I drive at night, I still think I see that red vacancy sign glowing through the fog, even when I know I'm nowhere near that county. But I never stop anymore, not when the road is quiet, not when the night is cold, and especially not when I see a room without mirrors. I'd been to some of the loudest stadiums in the world: Santiago Bernabeu, Old Trafford, Maracanã. You don't get to my level without living out of a suitcase, running on private jets, and spending nights in hotel rooms that all blend together after a while. But this time was different. I was supposed to be incognito. After a grueling press tour in LA and back-to-back matches in Mexico City, I needed a break. My manager suggested I disappear for a few days, drive solo through the quieter parts of the country, clear my head, ditch the paparazzi, and most importantly, get off social media. No fans, no selfies. Just me, the open road, and a chance to breathe like a normal person again. I wasn't expecting to end up in Wyoming. It was the kind of drive where the silence starts to feel personal. Hours of empty landscape, twisted cottonwood trees, and long abandoned ranch houses half swallowed by prairie grass. My rented Tahoe rolled past ghost towns and cattle fences as dusk settled in. Fog crept in over the plains like something alive. I'd been driving for over 10 hours straight, and my neck was stiff from constantly checking for fans or press. That's when I saw the sign. Pine Bluff Inn. Vacancy. Barely lit by a flickering neon arrow. Nothing about it looked comfortable. The kind of place even budget travel sites wouldn't list. But I didn't care. I wasn't after luxury. I needed to vanish for the night. Just a bed, a hot shower, and the promise of anonymity. The lot was nearly empty. One dusty pickup with expired tags and an old silver Buick sat near the edge. I pulled up, hoodie low over my face. The lobby smelled like burnt coffee and mothballs. A small desk fan whirred in the corner behind the counter. The woman running the front desk barely looked up. A small mercy. "You look beat," she muttered, flipping through a guest book with yellowing pages. "Long drive," I replied, deepening my accent to sound more tired than famous. She didn't ask my name, just gave me a plastic key card. "Room 209, top floor, far end." I nodded, took the key, and walked out into the thickening fog. The metal stair railing felt cold, almost damp. Crickets chirped somewhere in the dark, then stopped abruptly like something silenced them. When I entered the room, I was surprised by how empty it felt. Not physically. It had the basics: Bed, TV, lamp, mustard-colored curtains. But emotionally, the air was hollow, the way stadiums feel before the gates open. That dead silence, like nothing alive belonged there yet. The smell hit next. Not rot, not mildew, just something, sealed. The air felt stale and thick. I cracked the window slightly, but the fog just pushed in like a living thing trying to find its way inside. Still, I was too drained to care. I'd slept in weirder places, one time on a bench in Naples after missing a flight. I grabbed a shower and collapsed into bed. 11:52 p.m. I wasn't fully asleep when I heard it, a dragging noise across the metal balcony. Slow, inconsistent, like someone was crawling. Then a knock, not at my door, nearby. Room 207, maybe 208, silence. Then another knock, closer. I sat up, heart ticking. The fog pressed against the window like a slow tide. I pulled the curtain back slightly. Couldn't see more than a foot beyond the glass. Then came the knock. My door, 3 times. Steady, not frantic. The kind of knock you hear in nightmares where you already know who's behind the door. I stayed still. Trained reflexes kicked in. The same instincts I use on the field to read plays before they happen. Something was wrong. Deeply wrong. I crept toward the peephole, nothing. No feet, no shadows, just fog swirling under the balcony light. I turned to step back when I heard it. A voice. Right at the base of the door, where the draft slips through, a wet, whispering gurgle. I dropped to the ground, pressing my ear near the floor. The voice was close, too close. It wasn't speaking words I could recognize. It sounded muffled, foreign in a way that transcended language, like someone trying to imitate human speech with no understanding of how mouths work. I scrambled back, heart pounding. The whispering stopped. It took me 40 minutes to work up the nerve to open the door. My palms were still damp with sweat. When I finally turned the handle, there was no one outside, but something was. A wet trail on the concrete, smearing away from my room, as if something had slithered or crawled. It led toward the stairs, then vanished into the fog. I didn't think. I just grabbed my duffel bag, my phone, and headed toward the lobby, but it was empty. The front desk was unattended. The woman, gone. No note, no ringing bell. Just the soft hiss of the fan and an untouched guest book open to a blank page. I left. When I got back to the parking lot, I froze. The lights were off. Every single one. Like the entire place had gone dark in my absence. The only glow came from my headlights, which I'd left on low beam. And just past them, across from where I'd stayed, was room 210. The door was ajar. A figure stood inside, tall, motionless, watching. It didn't flinch, didn't move, just stood there. As I backed away, it slowly stepped out of view as if ducking behind the curtain. Not in fear, not hiding, just waiting. 3 days later, I called a local contact, a fan-turned-friend who lived near Cheyenne. Asked if he'd heard of the Pine Bluff Inn. His answer chilled me. Mate, that place burned down 2 years ago, electrical fire. No one ever rebuilt it. It's a husk now. No, I stayed there last week, I said. Room 209. Silence. There's no room 209 anymore, he said. That part collapsed. It's just rubble. I checked my dash cam later. Always keep one rolling, even when parked. Especially with fans sometimes finding me. At 11:57 p.m., it caught a figure crawling along the wall outside room 209. It had no feet, just pale hands dragging its body forward, head lolling to one side. When it reached my window, it stopped. And slowly, deliberately, pressed a hand to the glass. The face that followed wasn't human. Too many eyes, a smile too wide, and a mouth whispering something, even though the footage had no sound. I never posted about it, never told the press. But that fog, that room, something from it still follows me. Every time I travel, no matter how luxe the hotel, I make sure to check the windows, the door seams, the corners of the mirror. Because once you've been touched by that place, it remembers you. And sometimes on foggy nights, I think it still whispers. I've been to a lot of places. Swamps in Louisiana, caves in Utah, and stretches of nothing out in Arizona where the road folds over itself like dead skin. I've slept in tents, cars, lean-tos, even a rusty cargo trailer once. But nothing ever unsettled me the way that little off-ramp motel in southern Wyoming did. It was the kind of place you don't expect to remember. Just a blip on a long, lonesome highway. Late September. The sun had dipped behind craggy hills and a fog was rolling in low off the plains, soft and oily looking in the rearview mirror. I'd been on the road 10 hours straight, my hands cramped from gripping the wheel too long. The only other sound was the ticking of the dashboard clock and the occasional wind gust that thudded against the car like a quiet fist. I needed a bed. Nothing fancy, just something with a lock on the door, a mattress that didn't sag, and maybe a cup of gas station coffee in the morning. That's how I found the Pine Bluff Inn. You've seen places like it, squatting beside off-ramps in places people forget about. A sun-bleached sign, half the neon flickering. Vacancy. 2 rows of weathered doors with a cracked asphalt parking lot out front. A crooked satellite dish pointed at nothing. There were only 2 cars parked. One looked abandoned, the other was a rental like mine. I stepped inside the lobby just after 9:30. The place smelled like mold and cheap cinnamon air freshener. The carpet was torn in one corner. A dusty gumball machine stood near the door, full of faded candy that looked fossilized. Behind the counter sat a woman with wiry gray hair and deep, unreadable eyes. She looked up from a book with no cover. "You look like you've been on the road a while," she said. 10 hours, she nodded. "You want second floor or ground?" "Second's fine." She slid over a plastic keycard. "Room 209, just up the stairs at the far end." Her tone was pleasant enough, but there was something guarded in the way she said it, like she was giving me a warning without using the words. I thanked her and headed back outside. The fog had thickened into a kind of soupy haze, and the yellow parking lights made it all look jaundiced. My footsteps echoed on the metal staircase. I could hear a TV murmuring faintly from one of the rooms, but otherwise silence. Room 209 was at the far end of the balcony, right next to a broken soda machine with one blinking red LED. When I opened the door, the room greeted me with a dense stillness. A queen bed, a bolted-down TV, and a stained desk chair beside the window. The air smelled stale, with a chemical undertone like cheap cleaner masking something older. I noticed that the window wouldn't close all the way. A tiny crack remained at the top, and the air that came through it felt unnaturally cold, almost damp. Still, I was exhausted. I tossed my bag on the bed, showered quickly, and lay down without checking my phone. I just didn't feel like it. That should have been my first clue. 11:52 p.m. I was still half awake when I heard it. A soft dragging sound, like cloth against concrete, coming from the balcony outside. I sat up, heart knocking gently in my chest. It came again, not walking, dragging, like someone crawling. I stood slowly, walked to the window and gently pulled the curtain aside. Nothing. Just the fog and the faint hum of that busted soda machine. Then came the knock. 3 slow knocks. Not at my door. Not yet. It was next door, maybe 210. I leaned closer to the door, holding my breath. Another knock, slightly closer this time, then silence. And then 3 knocks, this time on my door. I didn't move, I didn't speak. I stepped quietly to the peephole. Nothing, just fog and shadow. I was about to turn away when I saw movement. A shadow low, too low, like someone was crouched down or crawling just beneath the peephole's view. I backed away slowly. Then under the door, right at the base, where light from the lot barely peeked in, I saw fingers, pale, small, twitching gently. Then came the whispering. Not words, more like liquid murmuring, like breath being pushed through water and bone. It hissed softly beneath the door, rising and falling like a chant from another room. Wet, uneven, slurred. I didn't speak, I didn't move. Eventually, the fingers receded. The whispering stopped, and for a long time there was only silence. I must have stood there for 20 minutes before cracking the door open. The hall was empty, but on the concrete just outside the threshold was a trail, like someone had dragged something, or themselves, away. A damp, discolored streak stretched across the walkway, curving slowly down the stairs. I followed it to the lobby. The front desk was abandoned. The woman was gone. Her chair sat pushed back, and her book was lying open face down beside an untouched cup of coffee that had gone cold. The little bell on the counter sat next to a yellowed guest book that only had 2 names on it. Mine, and someone named M. Clark, written in shaky, blocky handwriting 3 days before. I called out. No answer. I turned to leave, and just before stepping out the door, I heard a sound from the hallway behind the counter. Not footsteps, scraping, wet and slow, like skin being pulled over tile. I didn't wait. Back in the lot, I hurried to my car. As I turned the engine over, my headlights briefly illuminated the upper balcony. And there, at the far end near room 210, I saw it. The door was open just a crack, and in the darkness beyond, a silhouette stood still. Short, slight, its head tilted at an angle too far for any neck. It didn't move. It just stood and watched as I drove off. 3 days later, I called the Sweetwater County Sheriff's Office and asked about the Pine Bluff Inn. The deputy sounded tired. When I mentioned my stay, he paused. That place still open? I stayed there Monday night. Long pause. It was condemned in 21. Black mold, roof collapse, partial fire. Whole upper floors rotted out. That's not possible, I said. I was in room 209. He exhaled hard through the phone. There is no 209 anymore. When I got home, I checked my dash cam. I always leave it recording, habit from years on the road. At exactly 11:57 p.m., it caught movement outside room 209, a shape, small, crawling. It pulled itself along the balcony on elbows, slowly dragging its legs behind it. It reached my window, paused, then raised one trembling hand to the glass. The camera caught it in reflection. The face wasn't a face at all, but something melted and smooth with too many eyes spaced unevenly across the skin, twitching independently. And beneath them, it smiled, not with a mouth, but with a split right down the middle of the head, slowly stretching open into something far too wide. And then the recording cut to static. Out of curiosity, or stupidity, I returned to the Pine Bluff site 6 months later during a cross-country trip. The buildings were still there, mostly gutted. Vines had begun to crawl up the walls. The sign was gone. But I noticed something while walking past the remains of the second floor. Room 209's door was still hanging by a single rusted hinge, and scratched into the wood, barely visible, were 4 words. You shouldn't have looked. I've owned a small roadside motel in northern Idaho for the past 16 years. It's nothing fancy. 12 rooms, 1 front office, an old vending machine that eats quarters more than it dispenses snacks. But it pays the bills. My wife passed away 8 years ago, and the motel has been my full-time life ever since. I take care of everything myself. The front desk, the cleaning, maintenance. It keeps my days busy, and for the most part, the guests are quiet enough. But there's one room I don't rent out anymore. Room 6. It's strange, honestly. There's nothing different about that room compared to the others. Same bed frame, same wood paneling, same tiny TV mounted on the wall that gets 6 channels if the weather's kind. But something happened in that room about 4 years ago that I still can't explain, and I've never been able to forget it. It started in late October. The tourist traffic had mostly dried up for the season, and business was slow. Just a few truckers passing through, some older couples heading south for winter. The air was sharp and cold, and frost clung to the windows most mornings. A woman came in around 9:30 p.m., just as I was getting ready to close the office. She looked to be in her 30s. Pale skin, tired eyes like she hadn't slept in days. Her hair was soaking wet, not damp, dripping, and it hadn't been raining. She didn't have any luggage, just a small leather purse and a manila folder held close to her chest. I asked how I could help her, and she said she wanted a room for the night. She spoke politely but without warmth, like she was on autopilot. Normally, I'd assign room 2 or 7, the ones closest to the office. But for some reason that night I reached for the key to room 6. I handed it to her without thinking. I regret that more than I can put into words. She signed in under the name Marla Thorne, paid in cash, and headed toward the room without another word. The key barely jingled in her hand as she walked. That was the last time I saw her alive. Around 3:40 in the morning, I was woken by a sound. It wasn't loud, but it was off. A kind of low thudding noise, repetitive, like someone slowly banging their fist against a wall. At first, I thought it was the heater acting up again. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside, the air freezing against my face. The motel was quiet, dark, not a soul moving. But then I heard it again. That dull, hollow thud. It was coming from room 6. I knocked on the door and called out, "Everything all right in there?" No response. I knocked again, louder. Still nothing. I decided to use my master key. When I stepped inside, the room was ice cold, much colder than the outside air, which made no sense. The bed hadn't been slept in. The lights were off. The bathroom door was open and the sink was still dripping. But the woman was nowhere to be seen. Then I noticed something strange. The folder she had brought with her, the manila one, was lying on the floor near the bed. It was open. Inside were 4 printed photographs. All of them were of the same man, taken from different angles. In the background of each photo was a motel room. This motel, my motel, room 6, and in the last photo, the man was lying on the bed, blood trailing from his mouth, eyes wide open in terror. There was no blood in the room that night, no man, just the photos. I called the sheriff. They sent a deputy out within 20 minutes. He looked through the room, asked me some basic questions, took the photos for evidence, and said they'd try to locate the woman based on the name she gave. They never found her. No one named Marla Thorne was ever reported missing. No ID matched. The security camera at the front office, which should have recorded her checking in, was completely blank during that hour. The footage before and after, perfectly normal. But during the exact 15-minute window she arrived, nothing, just black screen. The real trouble started when I tried renting the room again. The next guest to stay in room 6 was a retired firefighter named Carl. He checked in 2 weeks later, stayed the night without issue. The next morning, he came into the office looking pale and shaken, said he had the worst dream of his life. He said he dreamed of a woman standing in the corner of the room, soaking wet, watching him sleep. Said she kept whispering something he couldn't understand, not English. And every time he closed his eyes, she got closer. By the end of the dream, she was leaning over him, inches from his face. He swore it was real. He left without taking his refund. Said he'd rather sleep in his truck than ever step foot in that room again. 2 weeks later, it happened again. Different guest, same experience. This time a middle-aged man from Spokane who said he woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of gasping. He thought someone was drowning. He checked the bathroom. Nothing. But when he turned back toward the bed, he said there were wet footprints leading from the corner of the room to the edge of the bed. He left in the middle of the night, didn't even ask for his deposit back. After the 3rd incident, I stopped renting out room 6. I gutted it entirely, stripped it bare. New carpet, new walls, even tore out the bathroom and rebuilt it from scratch. Didn't matter. That coldness stayed. Not the kind you can measure with a thermometer. The kind you feel in your spine. A stillness that sits on your chest. Room 6 just changed. I've had priests stay here, psychics, even some YouTuber ghost hunter types. They all leave saying the same thing. Something's wrong with that room. One priest from Oregon told me it felt like someone didn't finish dying there, that they're stuck halfway, like a needle skipping on a record. Whatever happened with that woman? Whatever she brought in that night, it left something behind. Something I don't think I'll ever understand. Now when guests ask for a room, I skip over room 6 entirely. I tell them it's being renovated. I haven't stepped foot in there in over a year, but sometimes late at night when the rest of the motel is quiet, I hear the sink dripping. And just once, I walked past the door and heard a voice inside. It was faint, but I swear I heard a woman whisper, "Don't look at the photos." I manage a small roadside motel in southern Indiana, the kind you pass without thinking twice. It's old, but clean, basic. 15 rooms, a neon sign buzzing half-lit by dusk. We get a lot of tired truckers, families on the way to somewhere better, and a few folks just looking to disappear for a night or two. I took over from my uncle in 2014 after he passed suddenly from a stroke. He left me everything: the land, the motel, and a single sentence in his will written in his own shaky handwriting. "Do not rent out room 103. I thought it was a joke at first. We don't even have a room 103, or I didn't think we did. Let me explain. On the surface, the layout is simple. 2 floors, 15 rooms numbered 101 through 115. Room 103 comes after 102, right? That's what I thought too. But when I first walked the property after getting the keys, I noticed something off. I went from room 101 to room 102, then the next door said 104. I checked the floor plans my uncle left in the office filing cabinet. Room 103 was on there, right between 102 and 104, clear as day. But physically, that door wasn't there. Just a blank strip of wall between the 2 rooms. No handle, no numbers, just nothing. Still, the electrical panel listed a circuit for room 103. I double-checked the breaker. It had power. There was a key for it on the ring, too, rusted, untouched. Brass tag labeled 103 in neat black engraving. I didn't tell anyone at first. Why would I? The place was already hard enough to keep booked without feeding rumors of missing rooms and weird old men writing cryptic messages in their wills. But one night, curiosity got the better of me. I stayed late after check-in hours, waited for the place to quiet down. The lot was empty except for a family in 109 and a long hauler in 115. I walked to the hallway between 102 and 104 with that brass key in my hand. The wall looked solid, but when I got real close, I saw a faint outline, like where drywall had been cut and repainted. Seamless, but there. I pressed my palm to it and felt cold. Not cool like a breeze or a shady spot. Cold, like meat out of a freezer. My skin stuck to the wall for a second before I yanked it back. I don't know what I expected to happen, maybe nothing. But then the hallway light above me flickered, and in that flicker, I saw a door, number 103, I swear to God, same ugly brown as the others, same steel handle, same dented kick plate. It hadn't been there before. I blinked. It was still there, as solid as anything else. I should have walked away, but I had the key. I slid it in. It turned with a loud metallic clunk, and the door opened about an inch before stopping like something heavy leaned against it from the inside. The smell hit me first. Wet earth, Moldavian. And something else, something sharp and coppery. I shut the door, fast, heart hammering in my chest. The next day it was gone again. Just wall. I tried telling myself I imagined it. Maybe stress, lack of sleep, taking on too much after my uncle passed. But I couldn't let it go. Over the next few weeks, I combed through every logbook, every receipt, every handwritten note he'd left. I found references to room 103 in the oldest reservation books. Back in the late 70s and early 80s, it was just another room. A guest named Leroy Dennison had stayed there in 1981 and never checked out. Police came, found the room empty, lights on, no signs of forced entry, no body, no trace. After that, the room stopped being used. Eventually, it stopped being acknowledged at all, until 3 weeks ago. Woman came in, middle-aged, polite, wore an old wool coat even though it was humid and 90 out. She asked for a room and tapped one red fingernail on the counter. I told her we only had a few left. She smiled and said, "Room 103, please." I froze. I hadn't said anything about that number. I told her we didn't have one. She kept smiling, but her eyes didn't. "Funny," she said. "I saw it in your hallway." I told her it was probably a mistake. She leaned in and whispered, "I stayed in that room once." In 1981, she didn't look that old. Maybe 50, maybe. Then she placed a photo on the desk, black and white, faded. It was of a motel hallway, ours. Clear as day, the door labeled 103 was in the center of the frame. A man was standing in front of it. I asked who he was. She just said, "Leroy." Before I could say anything else, she turned and left. Didn't take a room. Didn't come back. 2 nights later, I had to cover the night shift. Around 1:12 a.m., the breaker for the East Hall tripped. That's where rooms 101 through 105 are. I grabbed a flashlight and headed over. As I walked the hallway, the hair on my neck stood up. Every door was quiet. Lights were still flickering a little from the power surge. Then I saw it again. Room 103, lit by a single flickering ceiling bulb. This time the door was cracked open, just barely. I approached slowly, breath catching in my throat. I don't know why. Something primal inside me said not to go further, but I did. Inside, the air felt dense, like breathing underwater. The room looked untouched by time. Wood paneling, avocado green carpet, floral bedspread from the 1970s. On the nightstand sat a rotary phone and a glass of water. No dust, no cobwebs. It looked lived in. Then I noticed the mirror across from the bed. In it, I saw the reflection of the door behind me, and someone standing just outside it. I turned around. No one there. I looked back, still in the mirror, standing still, not moving, watching. I slammed the door shut, locked it, and ran. When I returned the next morning with 2 of the cleaning staff and a crowbar, we found nothing. Just wall again. I haven't seen it since, but I hear things. Footsteps down that hallway when no one's booked. Phones ringing from vacant rooms. And once, on the motel's front voicemail, a static-filled message. "Room 103 is ready for check-in." I stopped trying to make sense of it. I keep the key in a locked drawer now. Guests still ask about weird noises, cold spots. Some swear they've seen the door. I never tell them the truth. But every night before I close the office, I walk the east hallway. And I knock. Once. Just to make sure nothing knocks back. I never thought the place where I worked would become the backdrop of the darkest night of my life. I grew up in a quiet town in southern Illinois, the kind of place that people only pass through on their way somewhere else. My childhood wasn't much to brag about. My parents divorced when I was 10. My father left for good, and my mother worked herself into the ground just to keep the lights on. I was the middle child. My older brother Kyle was everything I wasn't: confident, athletic, good with people. And then there was Mary, our younger sister, 5 years behind me, bright-eyed, full of the kind of innocence I secretly envied. Kyle always treated me like I was a burden. He had that sharp, mocking tone that could cut deeper than fists. Mary, on the other hand, clung to me like I was her anchor. After Dad left, she'd crawl into my bed at night, whispering that she was afraid he'd come back angry, that he'd try to take her away. I'd tell her, "I won't let anything happen to you, ever." I meant it. At the time, I really did. But life has a way of twisting promises until they break. By the time I was in my 20s, things had gone wrong. I dropped out of college after 2 years, couldn't keep a steady job, ended up back home with Mom, who never hid her disappointment. "Your brother's got a career, your sister's got a future," she'd say, "and you can't even pay rent." Kyle had become a successful contractor, owned a house, had a wife and 2 kids. Mary, fresh out of high school, was the golden child, planning to go to nursing school, full of life, the kind of daughter Mom bragged about to neighbors. And me? I was working nights at a rundown roadside motel off I-70, scrubbing bathrooms and checking in truckers who never made eye contact. That motel, the Pinewood Inn, was where it all started. The Pinewood wasn't the kind of place you'd want to stay unless you were desperate. Faded neon sign buzzing in and out, paint peeling off the siding, a parking lot full of potholes. The manager, old Mr. Hastings, didn't care about much as long as the cash drawer balanced at the end of the night. I worked the graveyard shift, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., because no one else wanted it. Most nights were dead quiet. A couple of truckers, maybe a weary family pulling off the highway. Sometimes the silence was unbearable, broken only by the hum of the vending machine in the lobby. But sometimes silence wasn't the worst thing. One night in March, a storm had rolled in. The rain came sideways, rattling the motel windows. I was sitting behind the front desk, half asleep, when the door banged open. Kyle stood there, soaked to the bone, hair plastered to his forehead, eyes wild in a way I hadn't seen since we were kids. "What the hell are you doing here?" I asked, startled. "Needed a place," he muttered, glancing over his shoulder like he was being followed. "Just give me a room." I hesitated. "You've got a house, Kyle, a family. Why would you—" "Don't ask questions. Just give me a room." His voice was sharp, desperate. I slid a key across the counter. Room 6. He didn't thank me, just snatched it and walked out. Something about him unsettled me. The twitch in his jaw, the way his hand trembled when he signed the register. I wanted to call Mary, to tell her something was wrong, but I didn't. I told myself it was none of my business. That was the first mistake. 2 weeks later, Mary showed up at the Pinewood. It was just after midnight when she walked through the door carrying a small duffel bag. She looked nervous, shifting her weight from foot to foot. "Hey," she said softly. "Can I stay here tonight?" "Mary, what's going on?" She bit her lip. "I had a fight with Mom. She keeps pushing me about school, about moving out. I need a break, please, just for tonight." I gave her a key, no questions asked. Room 7, right next to Kyle's. As she turned to go, she paused. "Is Kyle here?" I froze. "Why would you ask that?" "I thought I saw his truck outside," she said. "But maybe I'm imagining it." I forced a smile. "You must be. Go get some sleep, okay?" She nodded, but her eyes lingered on me, searching for something I wasn't willing to say. That was the second mistake. It was Easter weekend, late April. The motel was fuller than usual. Families traveling, truckers waiting out the holiday. The air felt heavier that night, like the storm clouds were pressing down on us. Around 3 a.m., I was behind the desk fighting sleep when I heard it. A scream, high-pitched, female. It came from down the hall. Room 7, Mary's room. I bolted from the desk, heart hammering, and ran toward the sound. The hallway smelled damp, the carpet squishing under my shoes. Another scream ripped through the air, followed by a crash. I reached room 7, pounded on the door. "Mary, open up!" No answer, just muffled sobbing. I didn't think. I kicked the door in. The sight inside froze me where I stood. Mary was backed against the wall, tears streaming down her face, and standing over her, gun in hand, was Kyle. "Stay out of this," he snarled, whipping his head toward me. His eyes were bloodshot, his face twisted. "What the hell are you doing?" I shouted. "She was gonna leave," he spat. "She was gonna ruin everything, just like you always ruin everything," Mary sobbed. "Kyle, please, shut up," he screamed, the gun jerking toward her. My blood turned to ice. I raised my hands. "Kyle, listen to me. Put the gun down. We can fix this." "Fix this?" He laughed, a horrible, broken sound. "You think I can fix my life? You think I can fix Mom hating me, Alma leaving me, you two acting like I'm a goddamn monster? Number, the only way to fix this is to end it." He aimed at Mary. I lunged. The gun went off. The blast deafened me. For a split second, I thought it had hit her, but she was still standing, screaming. My shoulder burned. I realized the bullet had grazed me. I wrestled with him, hands slipping on the gun, our bodies crashing into the nightstand. The lamp shattered, plunging the room into darkness except for the flicker of the neon sign outside. "Kyle, stop!" I shouted, shoving him back. But he was stronger. Always stronger. He slammed me against the wall, pressing the gun into my chest. Mary screamed again, "Please, Kyle, don't!" For a moment, his face softened. His eyes flicked to her. And in that hesitation, I grabbed his wrist and twisted. The gun went off again. This time, Kyle dropped. The bullet had gone through his throat. He fell to the carpet, choking, blood pooling beneath him. His eyes locked on mine, wide with shock, and then... nothing. Silence. Mary collapsed to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. I stood there, shaking, the gun still in my hand. The smell of gunpowder and blood filled the room. My brother, my tormentor, my rival, my family was dead. The police arrived within minutes. Guests had called after hearing the gunshots. I was taken into custody, hands cuffed behind my back, while Mary sat wrapped in a blanket, answering questions through tears. The story spread fast. The Motel murder, they called it in the papers. They painted Kyle as a troubled man, me as the reluctant hero who had saved his sister. But that wasn't how it felt. It felt like I had killed a piece of myself. Mom refused to look at me at the funeral. She whispered, "You should have found another way." Mary, though. Mary hugged me so tight I thought I'd break. "You saved me," she whispered. "You kept your promise." But at night in my cell awaiting trial, I hear Kyle's voice, mocking, angry, broken. "You'll always be weak," he says. And maybe he's right. Because even though I saved Mary, I can't shake the feeling that I didn't just kill my brother that night. I killed whatever chance I had at ever being whole. I never liked motels. Even when I was a kid, they carried this strange weight about them. Like they were meant for people passing through, people who didn't belong, people who wanted to disappear. Hotels had polish, a sense of order. Motels, they felt like holding pens for restless strangers. Back when I was 23, I learned firsthand just how true that feeling could be. At the time, I was living with my parents in Cedar Ridge, a mid-sized town in northern Wisconsin. My twin brother Harper and I had grown up there, gone to the same schools, shared the same friends, and carried the same quiet burden of feeling like our lives were smaller than what we wanted. Cedar Ridge was safe, quiet, predictable, but it was suffocating too. Harper had always been the braver one. He talked often about leaving, about heading west, about chasing something bigger than the small-town grind. I was more cautious, maybe too cautious, content to stay in the safe rhythm of routine. But that year, something cracked. Harper had broken up with his long-term girlfriend, someone my parents always loved, but who, in truth, drained the life out of him. I had just lost my job at a warehouse after a round of layoffs. Both of us were restless, both of us itching for something. So when Harper said one evening, "Let's just take the car and drive anywhere," I didn't argue. We threw some clothes into backpacks, stuffed a cooler with a few sandwiches, and loaded up my old Honda Civic. We didn't have a destination. That was the point. For 3 days we drove aimlessly, stopping at diners and gas stations, listening to classic rock on the radio, trading off behind the wheel. Those were some of the happiest hours of my life. It felt like the world had opened. But then came the fourth night. We were on some desolate stretch of highway in Minnesota. Nothing but pine trees on either side. It was raining lightly, the road shimmering under the weak glow of my headlights. Harper was dozing in the passenger seat when the gas light came on. "Shit," I muttered, tapping the gauge. Harper stirred. "What's up?" "Low fuel. I should have stopped back at that last town." He yawned, rubbing his eyes. "Keep going. There's always a sign." He was right. 10 minutes later, a glowing neon arrow pierced the trees. Pine Haven Motel, gas, vacancy. The sign looked decades old, buzzing faintly in the rain. We turned off the highway and followed a cracked asphalt drive into a clearing. The Pine Haven Motel sat like a tired relic of another era. A single row of rooms, doors painted dull blue, a flickering office sign glowing in the window. Next to it, a pair of ancient gas pumps leaned like broken teeth. "Jesus," Harper muttered. "This place looks like a crime scene." "Gas is gas," I said, pulling up. Inside the office, the air smelled faintly of mildew and stale coffee. Behind the counter sat an older man with greasy hair combed flat and glasses that magnified his watery eyes. His name tag read Earl. "Evenin'," he said in a slow drawl. "Looking for gas or a room?" "Both," I replied. "Tank's almost dry. Pump's outside. Just fill and come back in to settle up." He slid a key across the counter. "Room 5. Cash only." Something about the way he stared at us made my stomach tighten, but Harper was already smirking. "Hell yeah," he whispered as we walked out. "This is how horror movies start." We laughed it off. We always laughed things off. The room was nothing special. 2 twin beds with sagging mattresses, a yellowed lamp, curtains that smelled of smoke. The carpet was damp near the bathroom, but it was shelter, and by the time we dropped our bags, exhaustion was setting in. Harper sat on the edge of his bed, scrolling through his phone. No signal. Figures. "Yeah," I said, pulling off my shoes. "We'll crash early, hit the road first thing." But Harper wasn't ready to sleep. "Let's walk around. Place is creepy as hell." "Harper, come on, just a lap around. You're telling me you're not curious?" I sighed, but he was already pulling on his jacket. That was Harper. Once he set his mind, you followed. We stepped out into the damp night. The rain had stopped, leaving the air heavy. The motel was eerily silent. We passed room after room, most of them dark. But when we reached the far end, I noticed something strange. Room 10's curtains twitched. Just a fraction, but enough to know someone was watching. I froze. Harper grinned. "Told you. Creepsville." We moved on, circling behind the motel where a strip of woods pressed close. That's when we saw it. Behind the dumpsters, half hidden by shadows, was a shape. At first I thought it was just a pile of trash bags, but then I saw the pale curve of an arm, a woman. She was slumped against the wall, her eyes wide open, mouth slightly agape. For a moment I thought she was staring at us. "Holy shit," Harper whispered, stepping closer. "Don't..." I grabbed his arm, but he was already kneeling, shaking her shoulder. "Ma'am, you okay?" No response. Her skin was cold. Before we could move, a voice barked from the darkness. "What the hell are you boys doing?" We spun. Earl, the manager, stood 10 feet away, his face twisted. "She's dead," Harper stammered. Earl's expression flickered, then smoothed. "Get back to your room, I'll handle it." "We should call the cops. Now!" His tone was sharp, final. Something in his eyes rooted me to the ground. For once, Harper didn't argue. We backed away, retreating to room 5. Inside, Harper paced. "That was a body, a dead body, Henry." "I know." And he didn't even look surprised. "I know. We can't stay here." But when we grabbed our bags and tried the car, the engine sputtered. Dead. Earl had our gas money. Earl had our key. Earl had us. What followed over the next hours blurred into a waking nightmare. The phone in our room rang at midnight. When I picked up, a woman's voice whispered, "Don't leave. He's watching." Then the line went dead. We peered through the curtains and saw Earl standing by the pumps, staring at our room, smoking a cigarette. At 2 a.m., someone tried our door. The knob rattled softly, slowly, as if testing it. Harper gripped a lamp like a weapon, his knuckles white. At 3, we heard dragging sounds outside, something heavy scraping across the pavement. When I looked through the peephole, I saw a dark smear leading from the dumpsters toward the woods. By dawn, we were half mad with fear. When the sun finally rose, we packed, ready to run on foot if we had to. But when we stepped outside, the lot was empty. Earl was gone. The gas pumps stood silent. We didn't wait. We sprinted down the road until a trucker picked us up and drove us 20 miles to the nearest station. From there, we called the police. When they investigated, the Pine Haven Motel was abandoned. No Earl, no body. Just 10 empty rooms, dusty and unused. "Hasn't been open in years," the sheriff said flatly. "But I know what I saw. Harper knows what he saw. Sometimes when I close my eyes, I still see the woman's pale face in the dark. Her eyes locked on mine, as if pleading for something I'll never understand." And sometimes late at night my phone rings once and the line is silent. I never liked motels. Even before all of this happened, I had this thing about them. Thin walls, stale sheets, and the unsettling quiet that hung in the air like a secret no one wanted to talk about. They always felt temporary, like places where people came to disappear for a night, not rest. That summer, though, I didn't have a choice. My parents were driving cross-country from Illinois to Arizona, visiting my mom's sister who had just had surgery. I was 16 then, old enough to help, but not old enough to have any real say in where we stopped. And since Dad had worked a long overnight shift at the fire station before we left, he was exhausted. By the time we hit Nebraska, he couldn't keep his eyes open. Mom suggested we pull into a motel off the highway. That's how we ended up at the Havenwood Inn. I remember the neon sign flickering as we pulled into the lot, half the letters dead, buzzing like a wasp. The parking lot was nearly empty except for a couple of beat-up sedans and a white van with peeling paint. The office smelled faintly of cigarettes and air freshener, and the man behind the desk barely looked up as Dad checked us in. His eyes had the glazed look of someone who'd given up caring a long time ago. We got 2 adjoining rooms, one for Mom and Dad and the other for me and Nora. Nora was only 2 at the time. She was small for her age, with a mop of dark hair and wide brown eyes that seemed to notice everything. I always joked she was my shadow, following me around the house, tugging on my hand, babbling in half-formed words. That night, though, she was different. When we first entered the room, she clung to me tighter than usual. The motel room was exactly what you'd expect. 2 double beds with stiff floral comforters, a dresser with a TV bolted down, a chair in the corner that looked like it hadn't been sat in for years. The carpet smelled faintly of mildew. I set Nora down on one of the beds, but she didn't bounce or giggle like she usually did. She just stared at the corner near the bathroom, her little fingers gripping her stuffed rabbit. "What's up, Squirt?" I asked, sitting next to her. Her voice was small. "Man." I frowned. "What man?" She pointed toward the bathroom door. I checked. Of course, nothing was there, just cracked tile and a sink that dripped every few seconds. But when I came back, Nora wasn't laughing. She was watching me with this expression I couldn't place, like she knew something I didn't. Later, while Mom and Dad settled into their room, I tried to distract Nora with the TV. Some old animated movie was playing. She sat beside me, still holding her rabbit, her eyes fixed but distant. Halfway through, she tugged on my sleeve. "Mateo." "What?" Her lips curled into this eerie little smile, then she whispered, clear as day, "I got you." The way she said it, it wasn't her baby talk, it wasn't chopped up or stuttered, it was crisp, too crisp. I laughed nervously. "You scared me, kiddo." But my stomach knotted. It got worse. Around midnight, I was lying in bed with the TV off, trying to sleep. Nora had finally drifted off, her rabbit tucked under her chin. The hum of the air conditioner filled the silence, and then I heard her voice. "Mateo." I rolled over, groggy. "What, Nora?" She was sitting up in bed, staring at the door that led to the hallway. Her eyes were wide, her little mouth trembling before she whispered, "The man in the hallway." Every muscle in my body locked up. The hallway. I stared at the thin motel door, the light from the parking lot seeping through the gap underneath. My mind went wild. Was someone out there? One of the motel guests? That creepy guy at the front desk? I sat up, my hands shaking. The only thing I could find as a weapon was the metal ice bucket lid from the dresser. Pathetic, I know, but it was all I had. I crept toward the door, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would wake my parents next door. I pressed my eye to the peephole. Nothing. Just the empty hallway stretching in both directions. I turned back. Nora was smiling. The next day, I told Mom what she'd said. "She's 2, Mom said dismissively. "You're letting your imagination run wild." But it wasn't imagination. That night, she said something even worse. We had just finished eating fast food Mom had picked up. Nora was playing with her rabbit on the carpet when suddenly she froze, staring at the chair in the corner. "Baby on the wall," she whispered. I looked. The chair sat empty against the faded wallpaper, but her eyes followed something up the wall, her lips curling into that same eerie grin. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. By the third night, I was done sleeping. Mom and Dad wanted to push further west, but Dad was still too tired. We stayed again. Same motel, same rooms. At 3 a.m., I was still awake, scrolling on my phone with the volume low. That's when I heard her crying. I rushed over to her bed. "Nora, what's wrong?" She pointed, her finger trembling toward the closet. "The man in the closet." I stared at the closet door. It was cracked open an inch, the blackness inside swallowing the thin light from the nightstand lamp. Every instinct screamed at me to open it, to prove nothing was there, but I couldn't. Instead, I scooped her up. "You're sleeping with me tonight." But as I carried her back to my bed, she leaned in close to my ear and whispered, "I want to stay with the man." My blood ran cold. That was the moment I knew something was wrong with her. These weren't toddler words, these weren't baby sentences. She only spoke clearly when she was talking about him, and she wasn't scared. She wanted him. The last night at the Havenwood Inn is burned into me forever. I woke up to a sound, low, muffled laughter. Not just Nora's, but layered, like someone deeper was laughing with her. I shot up, heart hammering. She was standing at the foot of my bed. Her rabbit dangled from her hand. Her eyes were glassy, her grin too wide. "The man says, 'Come play.'" I froze, staring at the darkened corner of the room. And then I saw it. A figure. Tall. Too tall for the ceiling, hunched over, its shape wrong somehow, just watching. My throat closed. My body wouldn't move. Then Nora blinked. The glassiness vanished. She rubbed her eyes, yawned, and climbed back into bed like nothing had happened. When I looked back at the corner, it was empty. We left the motel the next morning. My parents never noticed anything strange. Nora doesn't talk about the man anymore. She's older now. 4. Happy. Normal, they say. But sometimes late at night when I walk past her room at home, I hear her whispering. Not baby talk, not clear sentences. Something in between. And sometimes, I swear I hear another voice whispering back.